My husband refused to take our child to the emergency room just to attend a meeting. I forgave him for that. But when I brought our child to the hospital, I accidentally saw him and his close friend walking into the maternity ward with her pregnant belly. His face said it all. He was the father of that child. I quietly left with my son, only to later ruin their affair during the sip and see event they planned for their baby. I am Angela Paxton, 35 years old, working at the Lexus Detroit dealership. My life used to be as peaceful as any other middle-class family, living in the suburban calm of Grosse Pointe Park. A small two-story house, a husband in the tech industry, and a 5-year-old son named James, who never failed to make me smile each morning. My husband, Parker, 37, is a financial manager at the tech company Luminatech. He worked a lot, spoke little, and always carried his laptop with him, even during family dinners. I used to believe that was a sign of his responsibility. Now I know it was the perfect curtain for something else. One early March evening, Detroit's cold was skin-cutting, snow melting slowly, and the wind whistling through the bare trees. James came down with a fever and clutched his stomach in pain. I called Parker, panic in my voice. "Can you come home now? He's really hurting." On the other end, I heard the click of a keyboard, mixed with a detached breath. "I'm in an urgent meeting. Just take him to the hospital first, okay?" I was silent for a few seconds, then nodded even though he couldn't see me. After hanging up, I grabbed my coat and carried James into the freezing wind that pierced deep into my chest. On the way to St. Mary Mercy Hospital in Livonia, I drove while comforting my son, cold rain drumming against the windshield like my own frantic heartbeat. James's body was burning up. When we arrived, I rushed into the pediatric department. After registering him, I stepped out into the hallway to wait for the nurse, trying to steady myself with even breaths. And that's when I saw something that froze my entire body. At the far end of the corridor, through the frosted glass of the maternity ward, Parker was guiding a woman in a gray coat into an OB/GYN exam room. I couldn't believe my eyes. He leaned in, said something to the nurse, then gently placed his hand on her back, a gesture he hadn't offered me in years. She looked up, and under the white hospital light, her face became clear. Tiffany Wilson. I knew her, a close friend of Parker's who worked at a marketing firm in the same building as Luminatech. Parker once mentioned her over dinner, said she was very smart with huge potential. I remember smiling and believing it. But now, as the nurse asked, "Are you the baby's father?" and Parker nodded, I felt something inside my chest break apart. I turned away, nearly running back toward the pediatric wing, afraid I would scream if I stayed a second longer. I held James tightly, trying to hide the trembling that spread through my body. The doctor said it was just mild food poisoning, not serious, and prescribed a few simple meds. I signed the discharge forms and thanked them absent-mindedly. As James fell asleep in the back seat, I sat still, watching the hospital sign blur in the rearview mirror. The thick rain blurred all the lights, and in that blur, everything I once believed in melted away. That night, Parker came home late. He said there was traffic. Same gray suit, same cologne I once loved. He kissed my forehead like nothing had happened. I answered with silence. We lay beside each other, two people in the same room, but from entirely different worlds. I heard the wind outside, James's soft breaths in the next room, and in that moment, I knew my life had turned down a different path. I didn't sleep. The dim yellow hallway light spilled across the bedroom wall. I stared at it for a long time and silently told myself, from now on, I will no longer believe his words, only the evidence. The next morning, Detroit was gray and damp, a misty drizzle falling lightly on the roof. Parker woke early as usual, carefully poured his coffee, adjusted his tie, then leaned down to kiss James on the forehead. My son giggled, unaware that the hands gently touching him belonged to a man who had just walked out of a maternity ward the night before. Parker turned to me and asked calmly, "Do you want me to take James to school today?" I smiled. "No need. We'll go together." He nodded, picked up his briefcase, and like every other morning, left the house without looking back. He thought I trusted him, but in truth, The calculations had already begun in my mind. Once the door closed, I watched from the window as his gray sedan pulled out of the driveway. I waited exactly 3 minutes, then opened Find My iPhone, the app we once installed to track each other's locations while traveling. On the screen, his location showed clearly: St. Mary Mercy Hospital, Livonia, not his downtown office in Detroit. I stared at that little blue dot, feeling a coldness inside me, like falling snow. I threw on my long coat, tucked my phone into my pocket, and left the house. The drive to Livonia took over 40 minutes, and with every mile, the emptiness inside me grew more pronounced. When I arrived, I parked in the visitor's lot, pulled up my collar, and walked into the lobby. Inside was the familiar hospital scent: disinfectant, sweat, and fear. I walked up to the maternity reception desk, trying to speak calmly. "Excuse me, I'm a friend of Tiffany Wilson. Which room is she in?" The young nurse looked up, scanned me from head to toe, and said quietly, "Room 303. She's waiting for an ultrasound." I nodded, thanked her, and slowly walked down the hallway. The sound of fetal heart monitors pulsed steadily from room to room. Each step I took felt like I was treading on splintered memories. When I reached room 303, I stopped. The door was slightly ajar, and through the narrow gap, I heard Tiffany's voice, faint and trembling. "The doctor said the baby's only 24 weeks, could be born premature at any time. If she doesn't survive, is it because I sinned? Because I cheated?" A long silence followed. Then I heard Parker's voice, low and steady. "Don't think that way. I'll take responsibility. Just stay calm." That voice, once the same one that had comforted me the night I gave birth to James, now twisted my stomach in knots. I had to brace myself against the wall to keep from collapsing. The room smelled of antiseptic, but to me, the air felt thick and heavy with betrayal. I backed away, step by step, my heart pounding, my breath tight, like someone was squeezing my throat. I don't remember how I got out of the hospital. I only recall that, when I opened my car door, my hand was still trembling. I sat for a while in silence, staring through the windshield as Detroit's sky turned into a thick gray blanket. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. I didn't feel pain anymore, only numbness. Every emotion had been drained, leaving behind a sharp, cold emptiness lit up by the blinding truth. I took a deep breath, started the car, and whispered, "All right. If you want to hide, I'll find the light." That night, Parker came home late. The clock was nearing 10 when the garage door creaked open. I was sitting in the living room, the dim yellow light reflecting off a glass of water in front of me. He walked in, his expensive cologne and the outdoor chill mixing with the lingering scent of hospital antiseptic. I asked softly, "You worked late today?" He didn't look at me, just answered casually, "Had to run the financial numbers for Q1, deadline's coming up." I nodded without saying anything else. In my mind, fragments of suspicion had already begun to align, like a map slowly revealing its shape. After a quick dinner of cold leftovers, Parker went upstairs, laptop in hand. I listened to the steady sound of keys tapping for about an hour, then silence. The bedroom door was ajar, the blue light from the screen glowing faintly. Then it went dark. I knew he had fallen asleep. I waited 15 more minutes before quietly getting up. Outside, Detroit was soaked in a gentle rain. I opened the garage door, the cold air making my spine shiver. Parker's gray sedan sat neatly in the middle of the garage, spotless as always. I opened the door, leaned under the steering wheel, and gripped a small black device in my hand, the mini camera I'd ordered online 2 days earlier, thumb-sized with a built-in mic, connected directly to my phone. I carefully mounted it into a plastic crevice, precisely where a driver's eyes would never notice. A swift, decisive move, as if I'd been preparing for this my entire life. I shut the car door silently and checked the signal on my phone. A small green light appeared, connected successfully. I tucked the phone away and stood still in the garage for a few moments, listening to the rain drumming steadily on the tin roof. The smell of gas, metal, and guilt filled the air. But I wasn't trembling anymore. I just knew, with perfect clarity, that I had just set the first trap. 3 days later, after Parker left for work, I sat alone in the living room and opened the recording app on my phone. Dozens of short clips appeared, each just a few minutes long. I scrolled down to yesterday, a 20-minute segment. I hit play. His voice filled the small space inside the car, low, familiar, and chilling. He was talking to Nathan, his best friend, the same man I had invited over for Thanksgiving last year. Tiffany had a premature birth last night. The baby's in NICU, and the doctors say it could cost over $100,000. I'm going to temporarily pull from the company fund, just a small advance. I'll repay it later. A pause. Then Nathan chuckled lightly. Dex, are you insane? If they catch you, you'll lose everything, I know, Parker replied. But I can't abandon them. I have to take care of my child. I paused the video, my hands cold. Not just betrayal, not just lies. He had the audacity to steal company money to raise his illegitimate child. A man who once preached about work ethics and financial integrity, now saying, I'll repay it later, like an empty confession. I sat there for a long time, listening to the rain outside the window, my heart flooded with something strange. Cold, yet lucid, almost merciless in its clarity. I stared at the screen, paused on his face inside the car, streetlights casting shadows across his cheek. I whispered, You didn't just betray me, you committed a crime. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was back in control of the story. One evening after putting James to bed, I went downstairs to print his homework. The house was utterly still, only the ticking of the wall clock and the soft rain outside breaking the silence. I opened Parker's laptop on the desk. The screen was still lit. He had forgotten to close it when he left. An email window was open, the subject line catching my eye. Vendor payment, MW Care, LLC, March 6th. I froze for a moment, heart pounding. Part of me wanted to close it immediately, but the other part, the one now accustomed to suspicion, forced me to read. I didn't open the email. I just took a screenshot. That name, MW Care, LLC, kept spinning in my head like a code. I'd never heard of the company, but the words vendor payment told me this wasn't personal. It was business. The next morning, I called Fern, my close friend. She worked in the accounting department at Luminatech, same company as Parker. She was meticulous, discreet, and most importantly, she believed me. Fern, I said quietly, can you check a name for me? MW Care, LLC. If it shows up in the internal payment system, let me know. She paused, then said, All right. But if something's off, I'll have to follow accounting protocol, okay? I understand, I replied. I just need to know if it's real. That whole day, I carried around a waiting ache like someone was pressing pins into my chest. I still went to work, still sold cars, still smiled like an ordinary woman. But inside, every passing hour stretched tight. That afternoon, Fern's message appeared on my screen. Found it. MW Care, LLC, is a newly listed vendor approved by Parker. At least 6 payments made over the past 3 months, each a few $1,000s, totaling over $12,000, all labeled Consulting Retainer. I read it 3 times, hands going cold. Consulting Retainer, a clean phrase for a calculated act. Not a bookkeeping error, but deliberate embezzlement. He created a fake vendor, sent money through it regularly. Maybe for Tiffany, maybe to cover her premature birth costs. Either way, it was theft. I turned on the printer. Each sheet slid out, white, cold, and heavy. I clipped them together, placed them in a white envelope, and wrote across the edge in black ink. Proof. MW Care, LLC. Each shaky stroke felt carved into flesh. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Small, thin, yet heavy with truth. A trail of blood that no amount of deleted data could erase. I whispered hoarsely, I've found the bloodstain of his crime. 2 weeks later, on a quiet midweek evening, Parker was showering later than usual. He left his phone on the kitchen counter, screen still lit, a new message popping up. I was about to look away, but the sender's name made my heart freeze. Tiffany Wilson. My hand trembled slightly as I picked it up, entered his passcode, his birth date. The lock opened immediately. He never thought I would do this, because he believed in the silence I'd maintained for years. The message appeared. Baby Ellie will be discharged in 4 weeks. I think hosting a sip and see at your place would be perfect. Is your wife going to be away on business? I reread every word, as if my eyes refused to accept what they were seeing. Sip and see, Ellie, your place, every word a blade. Sip and see, a party to welcome a newborn, where parents proudly introduce their baby to friends. At his house. My house. Parker replied within seconds, no hesitation. Yeah. Go ahead and plan it. Her cousin's wedding is in early June. We'll have 3 days she's not home. I stood frozen, the phone burning in my hand. Every sentence was an irreversible truth. He wasn't just betraying me. He was about to turn the home I built with every overtime shift and small saving into a stage where his sin would be celebrated. I looked up at the kitchen. James' breakfast chair, the fridge covered in his drawings, last year's birthday card of me and Parker. All of it would become the backdrop for a sugar-coated lie where people toasted to his child. I gripped the phone, lips trembling. In my mind, images flashed. The hospital room, the MW Care LLC invoice, and now, this party invitation. Everything connected, a perfect chain of guilt. I took a deep breath, placed the phone back exactly where it was, and stepped back. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like the one holding the script. And he, though unaware, had just stepped into Act 2 of a play he wrote himself. The next morning, as Parker sipped his coffee and scrolled the news, I said softly, "My cousin's wedding is in Boston, early June. I'll be gone for 3 days." He looked up, tired eyes lighting up briefly. "Really?" "Good. I'll watch the house." I nodded, keeping my tone natural, like a wife who still trusted her husband. But in my mind, every detail of the plan had begun moving into place. That day, I left work early and visited a small hotel in downtown Detroit, 4 blocks from our home. I didn't check in, just reserved a room for early June, the date of the party. I paid cash, used no cards, and asked them not to keep personal info. When the clerk asked, "Business trip?" I smiled and said, "Just a few private days." Over the following days, I worked like a shadow. While Parker went to work, I stayed home collecting every piece. From the car cam, I clipped the parts where he discussed taking company money. From Fern, I received the stamped internal statements, enough to prove embezzlement. From his laptop, I printed screenshots of the MW Care LLC email and payment records. I labeled each item, arranged them by date, and clipped them in transparent folders. On the third night, I sat alone in the study, laptop open, its light casting shadows on my face. I launched a presentation app, dragged each image into sequence, set the text in white on black. The first slide read, "The 2 lives of Parker Paxton." I stared at that line for a long time. Each slide after showed another mask he wore, model husband, good father, trusted manager. And beneath those images lay the truth. Invoices, audio recordings, payment records, text messages with Tiffany. I didn't rush. I added each slow transition, each photo sliding across the screen like a blade. When done, I saved 3 copies, one on a USB drive, one to an anonymous email, and one on my phone. I leaned back. The clock passed midnight. Outside, the train horn echoed from the Detroit River, long, cold, and solitary. I closed my eyes, listening to it echo like a warning from the future, that some truths can never be buried. I opened my eyes and whispered to myself, "If you want to parade as a perfect father, I'll show them your other face, the traitor." 2 months passed. Tiffany delivered prematurely, but the baby survived after 8 weeks in the NICU. I didn't have to seek it out. Everything came to me. That morning, I saw their photo appear on Facebook. Tiffany cradling the baby, her face exhausted but radiant. Beside her, Parker draped an arm around her shoulders, his eyes proud and tender, eyes that once made me believe he was a good man. His caption read, "Welcome home, Ellie." I stared at the photograph for a long time. Welcome home. The home he was referring to. The very place where my son and I still lived. The place he was about to use to welcome the child from his affair. I no longer felt pain. Only a pleasant chill. When the truth is fully exposed, it no longer hurts. It only readies you for the counterattack. Beneath the post, I read the announcement I had expected. Sip and see, Saturday, June 5th, at the Paxton residence. No surprise, no shock, just a slight nod. Everything was unfolding exactly as Tiffany's message had told him. He didn't suspect anything, believing I'd really gone to Boston as I said. The next day, during my lunch break, I checked my work email and found a series of invites. Sip and see, the Paxton home. He had invited nearly 40 people, all his colleagues and new clients, people who had never known me, had never stepped into that house, had never seen the truth behind the framed family pictures in the living room. I finished reading, didn't laugh, didn't speak. I only took a slow sip of coffee, opened my laptop, and created a new folder on the screen. I named it Sip and See, June 5th. Inside, I copied every document I had prepared. The car camera footage, the MW Care LLC statements from Fern, the screenshots of the emails, and the recorded conversations between him and Nathan. I numbered each file and labeled them clearly, then made 2 backup copies, one on a USB drive, one sent to a cloud account he did not know about. I looked up at the window. On the street outside, lilac bushes bloomed, people walked their dogs, children ran about. A normal, peaceful day, yet I knew I was entering a phase with no turning back. I leaned in the chair, hearing my heartbeat steady. I was no longer afraid, not even angry. I was waiting for June 5th, the day he would publicly celebrate a false joy, and I would expose the truest truth. On the evening of June 4th, I arrived at the small hotel I had booked 2 months earlier. A third-floor room overlooking the Detroit River, quiet and spotless. I placed my bag down, took out the USB, the printed materials, and the spare envelope, arranging them neatly on the wooden desk beside the window. The last rays of daylight fell on the desk, casting a soft golden glow, warm yet strange. I sat there, opened my phone, and called Fern. Her voice came through the speaker, slightly trembling. "Are you all right, Angela?" I looked at the pile of documents spread out before me and replied slowly, "I'm okay. But I need your help with one more thing." I lowered my voice. "If anything happens, if he reacts or I don't contact you in 2 days, send that envelope to Attorney Mitchell. He already knows." There was a silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Fern asked, "Are you sure, Angela?" This will change everything." I closed my eyes, my tone calm but firm. "No one deserves to be betrayed in the dark, Fern." "He's lived his lies long enough," Fern sighed. "I will do as you say. Be careful. I will be all right." I hung up and entered the bathroom. The yellow light on the mirror cast a soft layer of warmth. I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. The woman looking back was strange, her eyes no longer clear as before, but deep, dark, and resolute. I opened my makeup bag, picked up a deep red lipstick, and slowly drew a line on my lips. That red was not for seduction, but a suit of armor, the only thing that made me feel strong. On the desk, the laptop still glowed, its screen frozen on the first slide of the presentation. The 2 lives of Parker Paxton. I walked over and looked at it for a long moment. The blue light from the screen spread across my face, mingling with the room's lamplight, making me look like someone else. No longer the fragile Angela, but someone taking control. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and turned off the light. Outside, the rain had begun to tap on the windowpane, like the sound of an ending approaching. Tomorrow, that house will no longer belong to Parker. Tomorrow, the truth will be seen. In the light. In front of everyone. On Saturday afternoon, Detroit was bathed in bright sunshine. I parked 4 houses away from ours and stood at a distance, looking toward my home. From here, I could see SUVs packed down the driveway, the gate wide open, voices of laughter echoing. On the fence, pink and white balloons intertwined, a sign in front of the door reading, "Welcome, baby Ellie." I smiled thinly. That sign hung on the very house I had repainted last summer. I crossed the street and joined the crowd. Inside, the house glowed. The scent of wine and cake filled the air. About 40 guests, mostly Parker's colleagues and clients, stood chatting. Everyone smiling, raising their glasses, unaware that the party was built on lies. I stood outside the kitchen door, quietly observing through the glass. Tiffany wore a long white dress, holding the tiny baby girl, Ellie. She looked pale, yet her face shone in the light of congratulations. Next to her, Parker draped his arm over her shoulder, a smile so bright it seemed fake. He stood in the living room with a champagne flute, the window light resting on his confident face. "Thank you all for coming," he said loudly, his voice clear and calm, like he was leading a meeting. "Today is a special day, the day we welcome baby Ellie into the world." The applause followed. And at that very moment, the TV in the living room lit up. The screen turned to black. One simple cold line appeared. "The Two Lives of Parker Paxton." The music died. Everyone turned to look. The first slide appeared. The MW Care LLC bank statement, $12,000. Consulting retainer. Then the next, screenshot of the email, vendor payment, March 6th. Then the image from the hospital at St. Mary Mercy, sign for room 303. A voice crackled through the speakers. Parker's voice, pulled from the car cam. "Tiffany delivered prematurely last night. NICU costs could exceed $100,000. I'll pull from the company fund temporarily." The room went silent. Only the metallic clink of glasses touched accidentally broke the hush. Tiffany turned pale, lips parting. "Dex, what is this?" And Parker, standing there amid the crowd of colleagues, among the people who once admired him, only lowered his head. No more music, no more words. Only the truth, shining on the screen like a blade through the facade. And in that moment, I knew. I had taken back everything he stole. Not through violence, but through revelation. Parker couldn't speak a word. He looked around the room, where familiar faces suddenly felt alien. The man once lauded as the epitome of responsibility and professional ethics now stood in his own house, amidst stunned colleagues, like a criminal brought into public view. His hands trembled. The glass dropped to the floor, red wine spreading across the carpet like a stain of blood slowly widening. He staggered a few steps, then collapsed onto the sofa. No one said anything. Tiffany just held the baby tightly, avoiding everyone's eyes. I walked to the table, took a brown folder from my bag, and placed it gently on the wooden surface in the center of the room. The papers inside fanned out, the divorce papers all signed. I looked at him, voice calm and clear. "This is not revenge, Parker. This is necessary revelation." He looked up, eyes red-rimmed, lips trembling, but no sound came. In his gaze, I saw complete collapse, not only because he was exposed, but because he realized the woman in front of him was no longer someone he could control. A few guests quietly set their glasses down and left. A few others stayed, looking at me with a mix of sympathy and admiration. I said no more. I didn't need to. Everything had been spoken by the images, by the room's silence. I turned and walked out the door. The summer breeze in Detroit blew through, carrying the echo of cicadas and lingering scent of wine. Behind me, I heard someone choke back a sob, probably Tiffany, and the sound of a chair tipping over as Parker tried to stand. But I did not look back. 3 days later, word spread at Luminatech. An internal email was sent to all staff. Legal is investigating suspected budget embezzlement. Financial manager Parker Paxton is suspended. Until further notice, I wasn't surprised. Fern had forwarded all the evidence, the MW Care LLC statements, emails, and audio recordings, directly to the legal department. What I had prepared was not just for exposure, but for closure. In those 3 days, I didn't see Parker. He vanished from the house, no texts, no calls. Only the quiet home remained, the overturned chair, and the dark blotches of dried wine on the carpet, like evidence of the afternoon when all lies were laid bare in daylight. 2 weeks later, the local Detroit Financial News section ran a small item. Luminatech suspends financial manager Parker Paxton pending internal embezzlement investigation. I read the article in silence. No triumph, no agony, just as if I were watching a movie whose ending I'd already known. His life began to freefall, piece by piece. Tiffany was fired only a week later. The marketing firm where she worked cited breach of professional ethics affecting brand image. Her health insurance was cut off immediately. The bills for baby Ellie's treatment at St. Mary Mercy Hospital piled up, the amount far beyond what she could ever pay. I heard it through Fern, who still had a friend in the hospital finance division. Tiffany moved into a dilapidated apartment in East Point, living off temporary government assistance. From social media, I saw she appeared less often, her face hollow, her eyes those of someone waking from a long nightmare. As for Parker, the company pursued criminal charges. Once the legal department forwarded the file to the police, nothing could be undone. The internal memo confirmed he had withdrawn more than $12,000 from the project fund through the fake account MW Care LLC. That account was registered under a fictitious business ID, and the address listed was a P.O. box in Livonia. I remember letting out a sigh when I read that memo, not out of pity, but because the outcome felt as it must. One early morning in July, I received a text from Fern. He moved out of the city, rented an apartment in Dearborn, Southwest area. No one wants to rent to him after this. I looked out the window. The row of trees before the house swayed in the early sunlight. James was sitting on the front step, chalking scribbles across the pathway. I went outside, sat beside him, and felt his warm breath. My son looked up, asked innocently, "Mom, is Dad coming home again?" I smiled gently, stroked his hair. "It's okay, James. Some people just have to learn their lesson elsewhere." 3 months later, the Wayne County Family Court issued the final ruling. I was awarded full custody of James, the house, and all assets, based on evidence of Parker's financial fraud and marital misconduct. My lawyer took only 10 minutes to present the full dossier. Everything was prepared ahead of time. When the judge struck the gavel, I looked up and saw sunlight pour through the courtroom window. That light fell on the document stack, on my hands, on the calluses of the woman who was no longer victim. I did not cry. I simply whispered, "Justice doesn't need to shout. It only needs to arrive at the right time." A month later, Detroit slipped into early autumn. Leaves began to turn gold, skies were high and clear, and the river wind blew cold but gentle. I took James for a walk along the Detroit Riverwalk, a stone-paved path running parallel to the water, where city folks often came to exercise or watch the late afternoon pass. James ran ahead, holding a small dolphin-shaped kite, giggling every time the wind pulled the string taut. I walked slowly behind him, watching my son's laughter and feeling a lightness inside me, like water. We stopped at a stone bench near the dock. James turned around, his eyes clear and innocent, and asked, "Mom, is Dad coming back home?" That question made me pause slightly. A part of me once wanted to give him a soft answer, something like, "Maybe someday," or "He still loves you." But truth needs no embellishment, only to be spoken with kindness. I sat down, pulled James close, ran my fingers through his soft hair, and smiled. "It's okay, sweetheart. Some people only learn their lessons when they're by themselves." James nodded, as if he understood in that childlike way, not grasping all the facts, but sensing peace in my tone. He rested his head on my shoulder, his tiny hand holding mine tighter. The river breeze swept by, carrying the scent of water, wildflowers, and faint music from a distant cafe. I looked at the river, its surface reflecting the falling sunset, and thought about everything that had passed. I no longer felt anger toward Parker. I only felt a quiet emptiness, the kind left by people who had departed, and by myself, who had stepped out of the shadow of a former life. James suddenly tugged at my arm, lifted his kite high, and said, "Mom, it's flying higher now." I looked up and saw the jade-green kite stretching into the orange-red sky. I laughed, a true laugh, light and clear, carried off by the wind. In that moment, I realized some losses don't need to be filled, only left alone, because they've become the open sky where something else can rise. A few weeks later, I received an email inviting me to join a support group called Detroit Reclaim, a space for women who had experienced financial abuse, betrayal, or loss of control over their lives to come together, share, and learn how to begin again. I hesitated for a few seconds before clicking Join. The first meeting was held in a small room at the community center near Midtown. On the wall hung portraits of women of all ages, with a bold caption, "We don't recover what's lost, we build what's next." I sat in the back row, listening to each woman share her story. One controlled by her husband through bank accounts, another cheated out of inheritance by her brother, someone else tricked into signing debt contracts. Each story was a piece of pain I had once carried, and I realized I wasn't alone. When it was my turn, I stood up. The room fell silent. I looked around, the faces of women watching me with understanding, not judgment. I took a breath and said, "Betrayal doesn't kill us. It only cuts off the poison part so we can keep living." The words came out softly, like a breath, but as they echoed in the room, I felt something lift from my chest. An older woman in the front row leaned down, quietly taking notes. Then she looked up, eyes rimmed red. The room remained silent, only the faint sound of pens scratching paper, small but weighty. I sat down, feeling lighter. I didn't need to tell my whole story for sympathy. I just needed to say enough so someone else could see. From our deepest wounds, we can still become our own guide, and perhaps someone else's. After the meeting ended, a young woman approached and gripped my hand tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Because of you, I finally dared to speak my story." I smiled and replied, "Say it aloud. You'll feel lighter. Truth doesn't weaken us, it sets us free." Outside, the Detroit sky was deep purple at twilight, the glow of sunset reflecting off the glass doors. I stepped out into the street, feeling the summer wind through my hair, carrying the scent of coffee, traffic, and something deeply familiar, the smell of a beginning. Time passed faster than I expected. Summer slipped by, and fall arrived. The trees lining Jefferson Avenue turned yellow, their leaves falling in waves with the breeze. That morning, I woke early while James was still asleep. I made a cup of tea, put on a coat, and drove out of the house. The city was just waking up, mist still hanging lightly over the Detroit River. I stopped at the beginning of MacArthur Bridge, the span that connects the mainland to Belle Isle, where I once took James to watch fireworks every Independence Day. I got out, holding tightly a bundle of old keys. The front door, the garage, the safe, each once part of a marriage that had become nothing more than symbols of captivity. The river wind blew cold, tasting faintly of metal. I leaned against the railing, looking down at the churning water, the sunrise slowly spreading over its surface, painting golden light across the distant buildings. Everything was quiet, just the soft sound of waves and the steady beat of my heart. I reached out, holding the keys in my palm, feeling their weight, the weight of the past, of years spent holding on to a door that would never open again. Then I let go. A soft splash echoed, small but resonant. The keys spun, caught the morning light. then disappeared into the blue-gray water. I stood still, wind running through my hair, eyes watching the ripples spread outward. A lightness bloomed through my chest. Not joy, but the calm certainty of something truly closed. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and took a picture. The bridge, the river, and the sunrise behind me. A frame with no other people, but the clearest proof I had chosen freedom. And betrayal doesn't need forgiveness to disappear. It only needs to be seen.